Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this final session. It's a very important one, actually, because we're going to shine the spotlight now on one of the best known and indeed largest countries in South America. I'm sure many of you have some preconceptions, and we're going to try and unpick those and find out just a little bit more about Brazil. Well, joining me to do that are three men who are extremely well placed in terms of their experience and knowledge, and we'll be finding out a little bit more about that as well. So from the far end, I have Leonardo Letelier, who is the founder and chief executive of SITAWI, a company that we'll be hearing just a little bit more about later. And then we've got Juan Quiros, who is president of Investe, beside me here. And again, Investe is an organization which we will talk a little bit more about. And I'd like to begin with Marcus Troyjo, who is director of BRICLab at Columbia University in the US. Marcus, Brazil has really faced what could be described as a perfect storm of challenges over the last 2 years. Can you just set out what has happened and why to Brazil? And tell us a little bit about the economic situation it finds itself in at the moment.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you Andrea and with Juan and Leonardo. You know, back in 2010, Brazil was growing at China-like rates, 7.5%.
That's why it's a brick, right?
It's a brick. And back then, I remember having a conversation with a Brazilian, very famous cartoonist and writer of children's books, travels around the world. And he said, "Oh, Marcos, you know, I think we have to change the name of our country. Instead of calling it simply Brazil, we should add an exclamation mark. Because whenever you're at a cocktail party abroad and people ask you where you're from and you say you're from Brazil, the reaction is Brazil, right?" Because not only it was about 7.5% growth, but it was about Brazil becoming an oil superpower, given deep water pre-salt reserves, the credit boom that was characteristics of the Lula years between 2003 and 2010, the incorporation of large, abundant layers of excluded population into the so-called middle class, and Brazil becoming a member of, you know, this elite club of emerging nations that is the BRICS. So I think it was fair to say that only 6 years ago, Brazil was experiencing what we could call Brazil mania, right? But if we go back, for example, to 2002, the year that Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was elected president, the impression around the world is that Brazil was going to go bust, that Brazil would probably go down the same path that Argentina did a year before, when in a period of a year and a half, Argentina had 4 different presidents with de facto devaluation of the local currency of 40%. Large unemployment, the difference being Brazil is a 200 million people country, Argentina 40 million. So 14 years ago, we were experiencing Brazil phobia, right? So are we back to Brazil phobia now? I don't think we are. The great Harvard economist Daniel Rodrik recently said that the most underrated country in the world today is Brazil, because Brazil is fighting corruption, Brazil is increasing transparency, Brazil has impeached a president that was not only incompetent, but in a major way presided over some of the institutions where this corruption became systemic in the past 12 years. And I think Brazil is resuming growth. You know, the best performing stock market in 2016 is Bovespa. Our currency appreciated nearly 30% against the dollar this year. So I think it's about rebuilding the future again. I think the best brand for the current sentiment in Brazil and the one for the next 2 years and a half, that it's the time left for the current president, is that it's Brazil revamping. It's Brazil once again clearing the conditions ahead of itself to ride the future.
Juan, can I just begin with you by asking you to tell us all a little bit about Investe and what it is that you do, and indeed how that plays into this idea of building growth and pushing Brazil out of recession.
This is our agency for investment and trade of the state of São Paulo. Maybe somebody in the audience asking what is São Paulo. São Paulo is the biggest state in Brazil. We are 45 million people. As a country, we could be the fourth largest economy of Latin America and the 22nd economy in the world.
Wow.
Just to give an idea, our budget each year, we have a budget of $70 billion in our state. Investe is an agency that takes care of investment and trade. Any company that wants to go to the state of São Paulo in Brazil to do investments has to look for us. We will help them to do their investment there. We will give you all the conditions like infrastructure. We will discuss tax incentives, and we will go and see what are the needs for the investor has to have a good willing to invest in our states.
And so you're dealing with foreign investors, indeed with investors from this region?
Yes, we are dealing with foreign investors. And yesterday we signed an agreement with the Free Zone, Jollibee Free Zone, where the state of São Paulo will have a platform for export. A small and medium company will be here next year with their product, and we will be selling not only to the local market, but for Middle East market, Africa, and Iran.
So manufacturing in São Paulo to sell outside?
Yes, we'll be manufacturing in São Paulo, like food processing, medical equipment, and many others that we are discussing with the International Trade Organization, what are the needs, and from then on, we'll be operating from Dubai. This is the right place to operate.
And that deal that you signed yesterday, presumably you didn't start that process while you were here. It's something that's been ongoing, is it?
You see, I was president of APEC, which is a national organization for export and investment. And by 2003, Marx, President Lula asked me that he wanted to come to the Middle East and have a country as a reference to start. And he asked me to go to the Middle East and check what will be the country. That was April 2003. After 20 days, I came back, 20 days, I came back with President. I select the country. And he asked me, what country? The Emirates. Are you crazy? What are the Emirates? Bring them up. He opened the map here. I said, you have so many Arab states, huge, big Arab states that you want the Emirates. But not only the Emirates, I want Dubai. Are you crazy? But he accepted our recommendation. I told him that here was the future. And we came back here in April 2004, was our first presidential visit in the Middle East, was here in Dubai. So I know this country for the last I've been here 18 times.
Right. Well, I would like to talk to you a little bit later about other opportunities that there may be here. But before that, Leonardo, I'd like to bring you in because most of us have been here for the last 2 days and we've heard a lot about investment. We haven't heard much about the kind of company that you are running as a social entrepreneur. Can you explain to us just a little bit about what a social entrepreneur is and what it is that you are doing?
Okay, thank you, Andrea, and thank you, the organizers, for the invitation. Basically, the idea behind social entrepreneurship is to use the concepts and the constructs of business, but for social impact. So the organization I run, which is called SITAWI Finance for Good, basically what we do is think about the values we want to put in the value of money. So we advise investors and financial institutions on their financial investments on how to integrate social, environmental, and governance considerations in their valuations, in their portfolio. And we operate philanthropic capital. So we're not a conventional asset manager, if you will. We are a philanthropic asset manager. We get donations from individuals and corporations and create funds. These are not investments funds. Then money is not going back to these donors. Basically, it's going forward towards social impact. So each different fund has a different mandate. It can be health, can be education, focused on Brazil. And the mandates are negotiated with each donor or the starter of the fund on how much they want to participate, how much they want to help to choose the organization they're going to receive the money, and how much they want to delegate to us. That's one aspect of this social finance side. The other is that we provide loans to nonprofits and social enterprises. And we developed social impact bonds in Brazil as well, which is a performance contract with governments to deliver social impact. And with that social impact comes savings for the government. From that savings, the government can actually pay investors, and investors can make a return if the social metrics are met.
And the incentive for companies to get involved with you is what? Because there may be some people who are thinking, look, it's about profitability. We heard this in a session that I was chairing yesterday, in fact. It's all about profitability. So what would you say to that argument?
So there are a few ways to look at this. Yes and no, it's all about profitability, but if you look at only on the short term, most likely you're going to make decisions that you regret on the long term. On the long term, if you make investments that make communities healthier, stronger, more resilient, you have a better workforce, you have a better market, and you have a better profit on the long term. The other thing is, if you look at consumers or even workers, consumers more and more around the world, especially in Brazil, they want to buy goods and services from companies that are good, say corporate citizens, that do their part in society, and their part is beyond profits. Their part is more than jobs and taxes. People want to work in companies that have values that they can espouse, that can admire, that they go home and they are proud not only of their paycheck, but also of the work they do and the product they put out. On the long term, I think that yields to more profitability than otherwise.
I just want to take an opportunity at this point to remind all of you that I'd like this to be an interactive session. We've got some great minds here, and I'm sure you've got some great questions. So if you would like to put a question to them, there are a couple of ways that you can do that. Either you can use the apps that you've got to put a question in through that process. It'll come to me here on my iPad, and I can ask it directly to our panelists. Or there will be an opportunity for you to come up to the mics here, and if you just raise your hand or come up to the mic, I will see you and give you the opportunity to ask a question. So do, while you're listening, have in mind that if there's anything you'd like to ask, I very much want to give you the opportunity to do that. For now, Marcus, just having heard the struggles and the challenges that Brazil has at the moment, do you share Juan's view about where we see the future, that there are these sunlit uplands around the corner, really, for Brazil?
Yeah, well, you know, the investment agency that's headed by, brilliantly, by the way, by Juan, of course, relates to the locomotive of the Brazilian economy, which is the state of São Paulo. But in more macro terms, the future is going to depend a lot on what this current government, the government of Michel Temer, accomplishes in terms of providing for Brazil's structural reforms, right? Brazil's labor legislation is completely outdated. It was drafted as of the Carta de Lavoro of Mussolini back in the 1930s. Brazil's public pension system is completely unsustainable, and many Brazilian states like Rio de Janeiro and Rio Grande do Sul are already experiencing the pernicious effects of that and lack of sustainability. We also have to provide for fiscal reform in Brazil, not only making it less burdensome. Brazil's tax burden as a percentage of GDP today is about 35%. It's nearly that of a mature economy. And we have to make it simpler as well. But there is a clear agenda there. Many of these problems could have been more effectively attacked during the commodity boom that benefited Brazil greatly between 2005 and 2010. We did not do so, and now we're going to have to change the tire with the car running, but we're doing that. And I think with the accomplishment of the structural reforms in Brazil, Brazil is going to harmonize its capacities to compete internationally. So in the mid-run, I do see this glaring scenario that was described by Juan as well.
And what about the sectors that are really strong? Juan, where would you say the opportunities are, particularly for foreign investors?
You see, we saw and we are seeing 2017 as a growth year. And we have right now many opportunities. If you go to the construction sector, my sector, construction, you will see that over there you have many actives which are chips. To buy companies in Brazil today is not expensive. If you go to the sector of hospital and medical equipment, you see big opportunities. If you go to the agro business, you will see big opportunities. Right now, the country is prepared to have good deals with foreign investors. Mark say, and I agree with him, about infrastructure. We have many opportunities on infrastructure. Today, our governor is in New York with private investors discussing 4 projects for infrastructure. So we see here as an all that who want to invest in Brazil, the right time will be now, because we'll have next year, by the end of the year, a relative growth, I believe in 2.5%. Marcus is an expert, so I'm worried to say that, but this is my feeling as a businessman also. And 2018, we have a consecutive growth, and we will have a big change in the new president, and then more 4 years of a good future.
And Marcus, how stable do you feel Brazil is for investors?
I think it's very stable. Not only is Brazil the 6th largest destination of foreign direct investment, but it's got an independent judiciary, it's got regulatory agencies that work. And I think we've had a very tough time dealing with, which I think was a populist period in Brazil that actually took a long time and washed away some of the benefits that were brought to Brazil's political economy during the 1990s under President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, who was a great reformer. But you see, not only in terms of the demographics of Brazil that are still playing in our favor, the fact that Brazil is one of the few countries in the world that still has a lot of potential in terms of becoming an export platform as well. If you consider that Brazil's GDP is only occupied in 25% by the sum of exports and the sum of imports, you're not only talking about a huge domestic market, but also a huge potential for playing a major role in foreign trade. And now with, once again, this new government that took office just 5 months ago, with some of Brazil's hallmark companies like Petrobras, BNDES, the National Economic and Development Bank, we have the best people possible running those institutions. And you could see that as a reflex of the improvement in the stock value of these companies. So yes, there's a stability in Brazil. Yes, the risk factor has decreased dramatically after the Workers' Party was removed from power. And you have to look at globally as well. I mean, the risk factor has been redirected to other parts of the world. Look at Brexit, look at the US. In comparative terms, I think Brazil looks pretty stable. And given also what Juan was describing now, that 2017 will be a rebound year for Brazil's economy, the way forward looks much better than the recent past of Brazil.
Leonardo, we mentioned demographics there, and I wanted to ask you about the labor pool and how much of an asset is it, or indeed is it a hindering factor when we look at how Brazil grows?
So I think you can look at it from 2 perspectives. One is you have a highly qualified labor pool, but in some sectors there still needs a lot of training, and to some extent that is a good thing. There's space to build on that. But if you look at the sector I operate, is the super qualified US MBA types, and we get at least 2 people that want to volunteer for our organization a week that are overly qualified for most jobs in Brazil. And I think that reflects the fact that people want, as I was saying before, purpose. I sat in a panel next to the sustainability superintendent for Itaú, which is the first or second largest private retail bank in Brazil. And they have to hire, 3,000 people a year. If you go over time and people want purpose and you're offering them, say, a traditional job, the best talent will go elsewhere. Some of them will come to us, but we're small. We're a 25 people team. We won't be able to hire everybody. But if you're running a company and you're only getting second-class talent, over time that's going to erode your competitiveness. So I would advise for not only the businesses that are in Brazil, but the ones also the investors and the people who want to set up businesses in Brazil, to think long and hard, what is the value proposition they're offering? Because a stable job or a good income is not enough anymore. That was a good answer last century. That's not the best answer right now.
So what can startups, family businesses, investors, foreign investors coming in and maybe setting up a partnership in Brazil, what can they do to address those social challenges, both for the people and also, as you say, to get the very best people and to do the very best they can with their business?
So there's a new trend that you might have heard, and the audience as well, called impact investing, which is basically investing for social impact and financial return. And it's not the other way around. It's not investing for financial return with a collateral social impact. And that's been recognized by the G8. They just put a report on, I think they call it social impact investing. It's going to be $1 trillion business all over the world. That is very much in vogue in Brazil. And one simple way to look at it is that imagine that you're in a health sector or consumer sector. You can make a product that's going to be profitable, but it's going to be long-term damaging to the health of your consumers, or you can make something that's healthy, right? And that is a choice that people are making more and more with their conscience, with their values, not only where they work, but also where they shop. So thinking on not only what you're doing, so I'm coming to Brazil, investing in infrastructure or a food business, and for profitable reasons, but what is the product we're selling? What is the social challenge we're solving? If you're not solving a social need, and it's different than a consumer need, in the long term, you won't be relevant for the country.
It's fascinating. It's very interesting, a very interesting area. Juan, I wanted to ask you, you're obviously extremely experienced in doing business in this region. You've been here a number of times. How do you, and Brazilian businesses indeed, see the opportunities in the Middle East, both for the people of Dubai to come to you and indeed the other way around? What's that kind of synergy is there between the two countries?
I think that the first thing in business, you have to respect the culture. If you understand the culture, you will understand the people. You understand the people, you have more opportunity to talk about business. So if you take Brazil, for example, we have the largest Arab population outside Lebanon. For example, if we take Lebanon, we have 2.5 Lebanons in Brazil, descendant from the Arab community.
Including the president.
Including the president right now. So my mother was born in Syria. So we have this relationship as the culture. So from there on, you can do business. It's easier to do business. Here in the Arab community, you have to be very straight. You have to talk, and they have to understand directly what you want. So from there on, it's easier to fix what will be the objective of the negotiation. So Brazilian businessmen, they have flexibility for negotiating, but at the same time, we have to be transparent in the process. So that's why if you see the trade since we came here in 2004, and right now we have increased the trade between Brazil and UEA and 5 times. Wow. So it's small yet. It's small yet. So we have to work more every day to increase this relationship.
And what are the kind of sectors that work well for you?
Sectors.
The various areas. I mean, is it, you talked a little bit about manufacturing. Is it construction, or what areas are?
I think that right now it's processed food.
Right.
If you see the Arab country, look, Brazil as a supplier of food. So we have this, and we have to increase this relationship to help them to understand that we can, in fact, be the supplier of this processed food. But they have to understand also how we produce, what is our technology, and when they visit our factories, we have the responsibility that to show them, and they will understand that we are a serious supplier for the future and not supplier for spot moments. So relationship in the Arab community is very, very important. You have to look for their long relationship.
Marcus, we've talked a lot over the past few days about the changing relationship that South America may or may not have with the US as events unfold. Clearly, there is an interest within Latin America to look elsewhere and indeed to look to this region. How do you see that in terms of a long-term fruitful relationship?
Well, it's an excellent question, Andrea, because even if you take Brazil-US relations, unfortunately, you're talking about the two largest democracies of the West. You're talking about the two largest economies of the Americas. But their commercial exchange is quite limited. And, from 2009 on, the U.S. was overtaken by China as Brazil's most important trading partner. So the U.S. election affects us less than other countries, given, unfortunately, what has been relations flying under the potential. But I think, of course, the future of the global economy, and especially for a country that's a great exporter of food and mineral and agricultural commodities of Brazil, is Asia. And therefore, the UAE, as Juan was mentioning, in terms of food processing, logistics, refrigeration, trading, intermediation, is a natural partner for what I think is going to be Brazil's very important role as a supplier of food and minerals to this rising Asia, right? I mean, earlier this morning, I had the opportunity to share with you that if you take into consideration China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Indonesia, you're talking about a region in the world that's going to grow north of 5% a year every year for the next 15 years. And since the average income per capita in this country is about $3,000, when you double your income in a decade and a half, it means that the incremental income is going to go to consuming more calories, building more infrastructure. So there is another golden opportunity for Brazil, and therefore for the UAE to play an intermediation role, given the shift in the global balance of economic power to Asia. Therefore, Asia, of course, is a natural and very important destination for Brazil's exports and business.
Indeed. Just before we go on to questions from the audience, Leonardo, I just wanted to ask you a question about we've talked a lot about political change. We've also got environmental change as well. People's perceptions are changing. It changes what consumers want. You talked a little bit about it earlier, but how much should businesses be aware, in all the businesses that we're talking about today, of what consumers want? I mean, is that only in high-end consumer goods, or is it right across the board that companies should be aware of that?
Yeah. It's across the board, and it's you have consumers, but you also have the community as a larger stakeholder. For instance, we just had a major environmental incident with Samarco, which is a Vale and BHP Billiton subsidiary in Brazil. They are pretty much losing, or they haven't been able to regain their license to operate. And that's from a regulatory perspective, but that's also from a political perspective. And of course, these people are not buying iron ore, but they are an important constituency. In terms of consumer, that was seen, the social aspect was used to be seen as a plus for high-end products. So it's a great phone, it's a great car, and plus it pollutes less. and it's more and more seen as a mandatory attribute for products in all classes. Right? So if you look at, for instance, cars again, on the environment, not only consumers want it, but governments are regulating more and more. Typically, the regulation, at least in Brazil, follows the public sentiment. So as soon as people realize that society wants less polluting cars or less harmful food, that's going to be put into the labels, that's going to be put into regulations, into restrictions. So you can look at doing the bare minimum to be within the regulation. Okay, you're not going to be fined, but you're not going to be seen, as I was saying, as a good counterpart, a good member of society, if that's all you do, if that's how you look at, say, your larger responsibility.
Thank you for that. We've got quite a few questions coming in on the iPad, but I think I'd like to start by taking a couple from the floor. Would you like to just go up to the microphone there and just tell us who you are and who you would like to put your question to?
Right, Hussam from Established Brazil. All right, so Andrea, I would like to take the opportunity to ask this very diversified guest you have here. We have like new government now, and after 2 to 3 years of crisis, if you want to call it this way. And since this new government, since Michel came here, he became president, the market react very well. We have like around 20% in general, the market reacting on prospect that things will be better. So, gentlemen, if you were on his shoe-ish, on his, sectors, like I want to hear from Leonardo in connection, if you are in the shoes of the new president, what would you do? And from Marcos with his academic background, and from Juan with his on-the-ground experience helping entrepreneurs do business in Sao Paulo. What would you do on the shoe of the new president for this next 2 years? You think one thing will make influential and major change?
Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, no pressure. Would you like to start?
Yes. I think that the first things that he's doing right now is to bring the private sector to work with the government. You see, to reactivate the economy, private sector has to be very close to the government. So right now, I think that they're creating a good relationship, a healthy relationship with the private sector to bring national investors, because international investors want to see if the locals are investing. If the locals are investing, this is a good signal. So what the government is doing is to bring these people from the private sector and to work together in new projects, in infrastructure projects, in huge investment, local investments. At the same time, they're inviting people, businessmen, to be part of the cabinet. This is something good, because we from the private sector, that when we go to the government, we bring our experience as an administrator. We cannot see political. We are technical people. We do what we do in our companies. We do the best in process and knowledge. So this mix of government people and the private sector bringing people to work with the government, it will help our president to in a small space of time, to create good solution for the country. This is my particular opinion.
Marcus, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, well, I think those shoes are not very comfortable, by the way, but you see, many of the homework that had to be done has already started. I mean, look at macroeconomic reform, for example. Brazil abandoned the new economic matrix, quote unquote, that was adopted during the Dilma Rousseff years. Brazil is back to inflation targeting. Next year, we're going to be back into single-digit inflation. Brazil is back into fiscal responsibility. The issue of Social Security, as I mentioned, the average age of man going into retirement in Brazil is 55 years of age. How can that be possible? Even for a low middle income country like Brazil, life expectancy at birth is already edging close to 80 years of age. So how can you go into retirement to 55? So we have the ball rolling there as well. Simplifying the tax code in Brazil, making it simpler. It's something that's already been presented to Congress and I think will be approved by the end of Michel Temer's term. Making labor legislation more flexible so as to compete with other low-cost countries in the world. Reforming foreign policy, a process that already was initiated. I think it was also favored by the change of government in Argentina now. I think Brazil is, and its Mercosur partners will be finally able to sign an agreement with the European Union. And of course, the most important reform of all that I think Michel Temer can pave the way, but it's basically to whoever is up at the presidency as of 1st January 2019, which is truly reforming Brazil's political economy. Brazil is only investing 1% of its GDP in research, development, and innovation. If all this story that we hear about and read about on the fourth industrial revolution, the age of talent is true, how can we possibly build our future without having more inroads into this tech-intensive sectors? So I think these are basically the macro plan that's before Michel Temer. He has touched upon some of the points already, but there's more to be done, no doubt.
Leonardo, I suspect that you might quite like to be in the president's shoes. What would you do if you were?
I think all that my colleagues said is it's stuff that needs to be done. I typically come from a different angle, and I'll mix the answer. It's not only on the federal level, but also the state and municipal level. The social programs are mostly enacted because the government has to service population. So the way they look at it is how many hospital beds are built, how many patients are seen. It's very much on an activity basis, not on a result basis. So if, for instance, if you look at a prison, what they will measure the prison by is, okay, there's the safety issue, so no riots, this and that, but it's beds and food. If the inmate goes out of prison and comes back, it's almost like it's an additional impact to have, instead of looking at the other way around. It's a failure of the system. The prison should be measured by, or the system in general, by how many people do not come back, do not commit a crime. Because not only if they commit a crime, you spent all that money in vain, but then you spent also money in police, you spent money on the judiciary, and so on and so forth. If you look at daycare, same thing, or schools, it's not the classes, or not only the classes, but are they learning something? If you look at hospitals, is if they don't get sick or don't come back to the hospital. So twisting the way of looking at public policy for results indicators, even if we do a small inroad in a given program, that change of mindset, that can be pervasive. If you do it, say, a pilot in health, that can be pervasive in education and prison system and so on and so forth. So looking at public spending in a different light.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience? I have a couple here on my iPad, but I'll put it out to the audience first. Well, we've got one. Somebody's actually asked quite an interesting question. I think, Juan, I'll put this to you first, about business leaders who are coming from this area look at Latin America and they think that it might not be competitive against Africa and Asia because of the distances. Firstly, is this a true perception? And if not, what are the drivers in Brazil that can get over that in terms of scale, automation, logistics, expertise? How do you get around the fact that you're just very far away, particularly when it comes to food production?
Yes, competition in the world go through logistics right now. This is the difference in your price. That's why we create an agreement with DP World. They will help us to see the best logistics to bring our products to Dubai, and from Dubai to the Middle East and Africa, for example. I think that meat arrive here in Dubai cheaper than Australia and New Zealand, and they are very close to to the Emirates. So if we see some products where Brazil is highly competitive, where we have scale, we are competitive, having a good logistic. So right now, we are investing in innovation of technology applied in logistics and looking for partnership to create a more competitive price. And we have our product now. Next year, we'll have Dubai as our partner. A scale of production Brazil has. I think that Marcos stated very well when he said the labor cost is too high. If I see as a businessman, and if you ask me risk Brazil right now as a businessman, I think that we have to change urgently our labor legislation. I think this is the one point that will bring us very competitive for the international market and the local market, and at the same time will bring down our costs. But from the social point of view, I think that who is in the private sector and go to the government has more responsibility in the social part, because in the company, you have social program for your employees. In the government, we have the same mind as a businessman, work for the people, and not the people work for you.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? I have one here, actually, and Marcus, it's for you. It's about, really about the lab that you work in Columbia University, called BRICLab. And that obviously comes from BRIC, which was Jim O'Neill coined this term, about these up-and-coming countries in the world. And it came really before the financial crash as a term. Do you think that Brazil being part of that was good for Brazil, or was it actually, was it actually the other way around? Was it to Brazil's detriment? And does Brazil today compare with those other BRIC countries? They were Russia, India, and China.
Very good. Well, Andrea, you know, when Jim O'Neill first wrote about Brazil, Russia, India, and China, BRIC, not BRICS, back in 2001, he had in mind a number of companies and sectors that could be grouped together as an asset class, right? So BRICS 1.0 was about the performance of these countries in macroeconomic and investment terms. Our lab at Columbia University also looks into BRICS 2.0, which is these countries have come together. They are restructuring global governance. They have put together a new development bank that size-wise in 10 years will be as big as the World Bank. They have a contingency reserve arrangement that works as sort of a liquidity bank in case any of the 5 BRICS, now including South Africa, run into short-term cash problems. And they're doing a number of other things. I think it's been very good for Brazil to be included in this group, because after all, who does not want to believe in the elite of the emerging world if the future of the world will belong to emerging markets? But that has also made Brazil fall in love with the present. Brazil, that was always seen as the country of the future, fell in love with the present, and as we discussed here today, we did not enact many of the competitive reforms that were necessary for Brazil to move upwards. But today, looking at the world and giving the limited options that apparently are available for countries like Brazil, it was a very good idea to work on the institution building of the BRICS and have that as a clear possibility, not only for foreign policy, but also for doing trade and for attracting foreign direct investment. When you asked earlier on about this part of the world and what we can do with Latin America, is it too far? Well, trade relations with this part of the world can be helped by investment relations with this part of the world, because Brazil and other Latin American countries are in great need of infrastructure investment. And I think we have the right attitude in place with concessions, privatizations in roads, airports, management of water public systems. These are very great investment opportunities for this part of the world. And I think if you compare Brazil to the other BRICS, especially to India, right, which is growing very impressively, We do have a number of advantages. Of course, institutional stability is one of them. Democracy is one of them. We have a free press, we have freedom of speech, and we have clear separation of powers. It's an advantage we have, and by reorganizing our macroeconomic house, putting it in order, I think Brazil, once again, will be able to compete internationally, even with the Chinese dragon and the Indian elephant.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Leonardo, just before we go, I know that I think, is this your first visit to the region? And I just wanted to get your thoughts from being here. What are your perceptions of it? And what are you going to take away from this visit?
So first of all, I think it's a unique place. I haven't been to other places in the region, but at least Dubai definitely feels like that. It's very progressive, much more than the stereotype. And I recently found out that Dubai has created a ministry for tolerance, a ministry for youth, and a ministry for happiness, which I think it's a very interesting idea. I don't know more about it. Would love to know more, maybe get that to Brazil or help to make it more relevant here. The one thing I would twist, though, if I were in the shoes of a local ruler, was instead of thinking of happiness, which is something, is a state that you can spend your whole life being happy. It's not bad, of course, we all want that. But it's different from purpose. Purpose is when you've lived all your life and you're in the final moments of the game and you look back, what are you proud of? And I suspect that for most people, the answer is not going to be, oh, I made $1 billion. Right? It's going to be something much, much deeper. So you can make $1 billion all your life and be happy. That doesn't mean that you lived your purpose. So that's the only twist I would make, because I think at the end of the game, if you will, that will make more difference than the other way around.
Well, thank you all very much indeed. It's been a very diverse panel with lots of really great insights. To Juan Quiros, to Marcus Troyjo, and to Leonardo Letelier, thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been 2 days of truly extraordinary conversations. You heard yesterday a summation of yesterday's proceedings, and today was no less stimulating. We started this morning with a wonderful conversation about the Pacific Alliance and how many of you can benefit from the Pacific Alliance, as well as what's happening economically in Latin America. And it continued through many other conversations today, but many of you were here for the interview with President Vicente Fox, who is someone who always speaks his mind and is truly one of the more brilliant and visionary men, not only in Latin America, but also the world. We were very, very fortunate to have him here with us. The day continued with many other conversations, including a look at the benefits and the events around halal protein. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you knew that Brazil is the largest producer of halal in the world. Really extraordinary. And as well as having a conversation about Kidzania and other topics. We want to thank you for coming and participating in these 2 days of talks. And more than anything else, we want to encourage you to reach out to the people that you met, whether here in Dubai or in Latin America. We hope to see you at the next conference. We thank you for your time, we thank you for your patience, and we thank you for your attention. Enjoy.